This episode's guests are Manuela Welton and Tonthoza Uganja. Another episode with two female guests, so the three of you and me. I felt like I'm just there to listen and learn. Tonto and Manuela, are you bring such a deep cultural wealth into our group of luminaries. With having kind of grown up outside of the beaten track and bringing a lot of wisdom from their cultural heritage. We luckily dove into that. I really love learning with Tonto. Gotten to know her in the last year. In this episode, she just went all in on sharing with pride and with joy about what's actually possible on the continent of Africa. And Manuela, very similarly from a different background, but really riding that intercultural wave between Latin America and the US. She's got a master's from Harvard, but also is like dances her heart out with people that were former child soldiers. So there is a lot of depth in this one. Don't miss it. I'd say cue it up and get started. How did you like it?
Yeah. I felt an overwhelming sense of pride from both of them, and they were exchanging that with each other, and there was a lot of resonance for each other, and it felt like you were in a room we were in a room all close together, and the energy was buzzing. Both women are extremely talented in the area of being sensitive to their surroundings. I think we dove into their origin stories, and there were so many subtle pieces that they wove into why they were so proud to be making the impact that they are. And they just saw each other, and it was beautiful to witness. I really enjoyed this conversation. We are breaking the rules of business as usual. Join this exclusive Alter Braintrust series with Hope and Julian. I'd really love to start with a question that weaves both of you in. Tonthoza, you've defied societal expectations for women in the field of sustainable farming. Manuela, you've ventured into unique explorations of human connectivity and healing. Can you both share moments where people may have doubted your unconventional paths? And how did you persevere in the face of those challenges? Manuela, do you want to begin?
Sure. Hope, Julian, thank you for having me again. It's an honor to be here. And well, I think it all begins with our family, right? What we grow up into is kind of always questioned first and foremost by the closest people to us, which is our family. And being born into a family of artists, it was easy for me to choose this path, yet it wasn't through a focus of art or creativity, but it was more in service to help and support other people. My journey has taken me to learn from many different teachers and cultures and countries. And I think that I was definitely questioned at first I started at a time where none of what I do was being spoken of. And so I feel like I had to break certain barriers, both with my family and around me in society, of like, this is what I'm doing and I'm sticking to it. I never really fully marketed anything of what I did. And so I really kept raking the seeds in the soil on my own, slowly and patiently, and kept learning and learning and now teaching. But it was definitely, now that everybody talks about energy work and therapy and breathing, and it's easier for me to step into the world. But at first it was a little bit more complicated. And I think that when you know so deeply that what you're here to do is what you're here to do, there is no question around you as to the path that you're taking. And so for me, it was a path that I never chose, but I trusted and surrendered into it. And I think that thankfully with my teachers and the communities that I learned with and from, like having that support was really, it was kind of why I am here today.
Thank you. Your confidence and just your path rings true when you speak of it. And I love that you brought in seeds right from the beginning. And I think that's a perfect segue to you, Tonthoza. How do seeds land with you? And perhaps people doubted your unconventional path. I wonder if you could share with us.
Well, thank you again for allowing me to be part of this discussion. And well, I think I'll go back to like where Manuela started from, family. I I always tell people that I grew up in a smallholder farming family, but what I really don't like, never used to like talking about. Now I'm gonna be talking about it a little more because I think coming from the society I come from, growing up in Malawi, in Africa, and where gender norms are literally one of the biggest challenges in society pertaining to who you want to be, what you can do, and how much of a society role you can take. So coming from such a background where you are constantly fighting, and for me, the biggest way I had to prove that I was capable of following the path I'm now following, which is another long story, yes. But it comes from my deep rooted belief in education. My family believed in education. We grew up in a smallholder farm, as I continuously say. But for us to make it out, to make ourselves into something, we had to actually learn. We had to go to school, because going to school is a privilege where come I come from. And because I was privileged to love school, I loved reading, I loved science, I ended up following a path that I'm on right now. And it all came from a group of strong, rebellious women. Yes.
Strong, rebellious women, rule breakers. Did you
Yes.
both have rule breakers in your families? Speaking of families and origin.
Yes, mine particularly. Um, uh, uh, my mother was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, and but coming from the fact that they were definitely from a very rural community, that was unheard of. And we are known to be one of the villages back home where people value education, and maybe that's what literally helped me come out and be who I want to be. And it's that privilege, it's that education that's kind of pushed me forward, because I was rooted in ideals that always wanted to learn, always wanting to break the norm, always trying to be more powerful than we are, and trying to influence society. These are women of influence, not particularly to do with wealth or money, but to do with helping others and service.
Hmm.
What about you, Manuela? You surrounded by, do you have particular rule breakers or rebellious people in your circle?
I love this already. And women in education, I too come from a family of educators, and I believe education is at the root of everything. And so to hear you say that is chills. My father, particularly, well, both of my parents. My mother was the first, I think a rule breaker in her form. She created opportunity for those on the streets in her ballet school, and brought in like guns and knives and exchanged them for ballet shoes. So that for me was like a breaking of a form of dance that's so pristine, and then bringing people from all walks of life to gather and dance. And then my father was mostly the revolutionary in my family. He used his voice to denounce the government back in the 2000s of corruption, hence why we arrived to the United States. So I have these two very strong figures of breaking the rules, coloring outside the lines, and stepping into inspiration in their way. So I love to hear that, Tonto. Yeah.
That's actually
To,
very strong to what you just said.
I can
I
feel
see
it.
your faces. Yeah.
Yeah, I can feel it in the space. I'm almost envious. I don't think I was encouraged to color outside the lines when I was younger. I had to kind of figure that part out as I grew older, right? But this is why we have this group together, is to dive deeper and understand what what breaking the rules means for different people in different places, and how we can actually encourage our audience and our guests here to share those moments and to learn together that if we only follow those lines of drawing within the lines, it's going to be a pretty boring piece of art. Manuela, maybe you want to take us a level deeper. You just said exchanging guns with ballet shoes. I mean, that I want to hear the details. Like, do you mind going deeper and how that plays a role in your life now?
Of course, I think actually my mother was one of my strongest influences in life, bridging these two worlds that would never ever meet otherwise, and especially in Colombia where there's a still very strong class structure, wealth, and then extreme poverty. And my mom, coming from a background of wealth, like saw that opportunity and took it. It's as Tonthoza said, like being of service to culture, to community, to the people around us. And she could have easily just kept a ballet school, but her heart was so centered in the youth of Colombia. And we have an incredible, there's just a lot of youth that don't have the opportunities that she grew up with, I grew up with. And so she would go with her car, at that time she had somebody helping her drive, and then she would bring these ballet shoes and say, and give all these kids on the streets who are now in New York City Ballet, London Ballet, she said, like, here's an opportunity to come have a different life. I know that this is what I know this is the family you come from, and yet I am giving you an opportunity to come dance with the children of presidents and mayors and this and that, and bridging these two spaces that would never ever meet in an art form that potentially was never open to a society or to that level of society. And so from that, and growing up in her school, I would go every day and I would dance. And I think growing up in those rooms with people that had nothing and people that had everything gave me an opportunity to see that that's kind of what I wanted to do in my own work as well. How do we bridge these very distinct polarities, both economically, gender, age, and it can be done through art and creativity and education and powerful women, and men, and children. So yeah, this is she's one of my biggest inspirations in the work that I do. Actually, thank you for asking.
The word belief, that's come up, both of you, belief in education, connection to work that comes through you. And I'm wondering if both or one of you help to support the belief, nurture that in younger people right now. Do either of you mentor or work with younger people to help foster and draw out that self-belief that they can do anything, that they can break the rules, that they can color outside the lines?
I must say, yes. Personally, not just through the work of our social enterprise, but basically because the rural communities we work with are mostly young populations. If you go back to the current demographics of my country, the biggest population is young people, and it's not even a matter of choice to say we are singling out young people, but it's a necessity now. We have to look at sustenance, permanence, and there's if one of the biggest things I always talk about with my team is, okay, fine, what happens if we leave these societies now? What happens to this community? What's the change we are bringing about? It might not necessarily be money or even something materialistic, but what is it that we're sowing in these communities? And it comes with working with young people, allowing them to be innovative themselves, allowing them to design something of what their community stands for. So what resonates a lot with the communities we work with, is this ecosystem building, building an enabling
Mm.
environment for them to be who they have to be. But the guidance that we provide, it's the capacity building, making sure they understand where they can make a difference, and giving them the confidence and the self-esteem
Mm.
to actually make that difference. Because sometimes it's the difference between giving somebody fish to eat or giving them the knowledge to fish. It always goes back to that cycle. Can you do for yourself what you want others to do for you?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yes, it's most of our programs are basically oriented on capacity building and centered around mindset change and giving people the strength to become who they can be for the betterment of their communities.
Yeah, you mentioned it, right? Like Malawi, I just looked it up, has like 70% of people is under 30 years old. So by definition,
Yes.
you're gonna work with younger people. And you
Mhm.
mentioned it too, that you grew up with the privilege of coming from a line of or a lineage of educators, but we're talking about a country where going to school is still actually a real privilege, right? I personally experienced that in an exchange year when I went to Paraguay. I shared this on this series before, where suddenly school felt like everything, and I was like, this is almost crazy to someone who grew up in Germany, because school you take it for granted, and so
Yeah.
it's quite interesting. Tell us more about that mindset and that capacity building, because I think it's a huge value for people to hear about, and it's very very exciting what you're building. So if you don't mind, Tonto, if you can just share a little bit about what this social impact business is and how you actually how you're making those strides that you're making.
So I'll start with the fact that I am an advocate. I am a forester, an agroforest systems practitioner. So I basically work around sustainable land use practices and modeling and actually implementing practicalities towards sustainable land use systems in an integrated approach. So basically, our social enterprise is a land restoration and conservation extension service provider. It's an operator that works on projects that are to do with landscapes in this changing climate. So basically, our approach, we consider ourselves very different because, well, we are a grassroots organization, but most of all, we design approaches that are super fit for the communities themselves. We've seen a myriad of NGOs, a myriad of other sort of nonprofit organizations come into these landscapes, but there's no difference between today and 5 years ago. So, what exactly is the change here? So, we decided to do things a bit different, go skin deep with these communities because we believe we know them best. And that's why I love education. What it does is this continuous learning process allows you to have facets into um, defining what can change, what is there, and what you can utilize right now to make that simple step, that simple difference. It's the difference between let's wait for resources, let's wait for 1 million bucks to give to this community to do this project, other than you getting your feet and going deep into meeting somebody and having conversation with that person and
Mm.
helping them become something. So the mindset change I'm implying here is just opening them up to the possibility of what can be if they themselves just decided to make a change. What is around them that they can use to make their lives better. That's why we in our enterprise we always talk about 4 pillars: women empowerment, youth innovation. We are talking about biodiversity conservation, as well as creating green jobs, because in a poor community what everybody is thinking about is how can I meet my immediate need right now.
Mhm.
They're not
Right.
thinking about the future. They're not thinking about all of this, even climate change at the moment. Yes, we talk about it because they're seeing it in the community, but you can't convince somebody who doesn't have food on their table to think
Yeah.
about the future. So it's about looking at them now. What can I do to make that difference now? And that's what I mean by the
Mm.
interconnectivity between mindset change and um, capacity building.
Meeting them where they're at. I'm so keen. I don't know if the rest of you, I would love to hear if there are stories, if you have a particular story of seeing somebody's mindset shift or this connectivity of them feeling a new bond with their land or something in relation to the work you've done with a specific person in mind that you could share with us.
I have not a specific person in mind. I'm going to share a story about
Please.
a specific group of women. So
Love it.
when I founded SFS, the very first thing we did, I was very overzealous. Let me just be. Let me just put it out there. So I have this huge passion about working with the environment and working with farmers and being out there in the field. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to make this work. We're going to do this. And the question was simple: can I mobilize women farmers to restore their landscape? So I set up to start a group of women farmers. I started chatting with them. Also, what do you think about this issue? You are depleting the natural resources. What happens when this is gone? Oh, but we need to we need to sell this product so we can build our. I mean, we can put food on our table. We need firewood to make meals. We need all this. And then I'm like, okay, fine. What happens when it's done? You are the ones walking long distances. You are the ones who don't have bank accounts. You are the ones who do not, who are still going to suffer when all of this is done. So what can you do now? What do you think we can do now? Oh no, but we can. Yes, we can start selling honey. I'm like, okay, let's do that. But we don't have the resources to do it. I'm like, how much do you have? How much do you have? And then they started pulling their own money together. They started a village savings and loans group and had literally a box to keep that money. And that money grew. It's now a fund that actually facilitates the production of 3,000 kgs of honey in every 6 month cycle, which is literally over 70% of what they used to have before. And guess what? They now know the value of their woodlands. They know that they need pollinators like bees and biodiversity around them for them to thrive. And it's different. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm just saying
Hmm.
it's different. It's like from coming from zero to something.
And they have the context now. Now they see the biodiversity in a
Yes,
different way. They
in a
have that.
different way. It's and then
Oh.
they know how to they know why they have to conserve, and they also know how to utilize the same resources to make their lives
Hmm.
better. So it's not necessarily about, hey, don't talk, how much hectares have you done this for? How many? It's about what really this is the conversation going to stop here, or are they going to see continued effect, a ripple
Mm.
effect? It's a significant change scenario. It's the theory of change, thinking coming from a certain space to another space. You might not certainly see the difference. Everybody talks about impact, or how big is the impact, how big is the ripple effect. But think about it this way: if I can make one simple ripple today that will grow in years to come, it's a big difference. You're
Mm.
no longer where you were, and all I needed to do was move and find these women and do it.
You're sharing such a beautiful story, Tonto, and I really appreciate you naming, this very cognitive kind of way to approach impact, social impact, and like let's do something that matters in the world, and then let's scale it. That's the mindset of the Western world, and specifically, I guess. I mean, not to point out specific countries, but I guess in the United States of America, you find quite a bit of that. Manuela, I want to throw over the baton to you, because you moved from Colombia to the States, but you kept traveling around the world. You kept learning from, First Nations elders and indigenous healers across the world. Do you mind maybe sharing that intercultural experience you had from Colombia into the States and then back out again? I mean, you live in the U.S. right now, but you're more a global citizen than an American in my eyes.
Thank you, Julian. Before I go there, though, I have to say, Tonto, your energy is contagious. I feel like I could pack. I don't think we could package that energy, but I feel like there's no way.
I love you just said that. Yes.
I got it. So thank you for that. Now I'll go to the intercultural piece. Growing up with my family, actually, it was very planted in us the power of that intercultural connection. And so at a very young age, my family and I traveled quite a bit to different countries. And I think my first country that I remember is Portugal. And I remember getting on, well, actually, no, at age 4, my parents put me on a plane alone to go visit my aunt to Mexico. That was my first realization. I know that was bold.
Wow.
Was bold.
Do you remember that?
Say what?
You
They
remember?
put you on a plane alone?
I remember crying all the way there, and I remember crying all the way back. I cried.
Brave.
Fear of missing them, and then when I was coming back, I didn't want to come home. So at 4. And I think that planted that seed. At age 6, we started going to Portugal, and then realizing at such a young age that we can build all these walls around us and say, this is you, this is me, this is, I draw a line, and this is my land, this is your land. And in reality, there's something so beautiful about this planet that connects us, even just listening to Tonto. And it's the human heart, regardless of our story and our conditioning and our growing up in different stories. And we're built all differently, which creates our minds, lines, and differences. But in reality, if I look at you both, like all three of you, I see some part of myself in all of you, even though we don't look anything alike, and I think that that's what's so beautiful about planet Earth. And I have this theory, I don't know if it's true, but we might be one of the only planets that actually has a heart. And I think a lot of us, again, my theory, whether different planets or different beings exist, like we come here to learn how to connect at that level, and that service to humanity and that service to one another. And so traveling at a very young age and continuing to travel, it was a big desire to just see that really in reality, there's not a lot that kind of creates that difference between all of us. And having traveled to over 40, almost 50 countries around the world, I continue to see that politics and religion, and we don't have to get into those conversations, but those are very strong. Like, I believe this and I believe that. And when somebody asks me, how is it that you learned all of what you know, I really say that I opened my heart and my mind to everything I know. Like, I can show up to a Catholic church, a Jewish synagogue. I can go anywhere, and there's no like, this isn't for me. I keep a really open mind into all the belief systems and all the ways of being on this planet.
That
I
is
love how you said
freedom.
that.
I also would say, speaking of contagiousness, I bet when you land in spaces, people feel your contagious open heart. And I wonder if that is something that you actively, or you activate a space on purpose in ways to bring harmony, to bring connection, to bring healing when you're in spaces with people. Do you do that, Manuela?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Takes one to know and hope. I feel like you do that.
Yeah.
Too. I see you. What is this
I
saying?
see you.
You are. I feel like this entire room has that energy. I know Julian from his also, and Tonto, I don't know you, but I'm feeling that from you. So yeah, I do believe that a lot of what I come here, again, I think having my parents as those role models and who fought for a lot of social justice in Colombia. And we would go during this time actually of the year to some of the poorest communities in Colombia, and there was nothing between me and them. Like, I would come in for hugs, and that I was taught that at a very young age, and I am really grateful that I was. I think that we've created a hierarchy of belief systems, but in reality, me and the president, the only thing that's different is that he started earlier and he had different opportunities. Me and the person who's helping clean the bathrooms at the airport, I always make sure that I say hello and thank you. It's like the same thing. We're all the same, and it's just recognizing one another for that. So I tend to do, back to my mom's story, tend to build those bridges even in my day-to-day life.
You're giving me hope for my two children, Sophia and Alfie. I have traveled the world with them, not as many countries as you, Manuela, but we started with our children very young, bringing them all over, dropping them into very diverse communities and doing some service, some education. And I was wondering if it was going to sink in and last. We haven't been traveling extensively for the last few years, really settling in Canada for a while. And I thought, is it all just kind of, has it gone? Those years of travel, those experiences, those connections? And it absolutely has not. Like osmosis, it's like it's gone into their heart and the way they relate to each other. Their world, the natural world is a big connection for them. And seeing how our planet looks different in so many different spaces and places and peoples, I think we're talking about education. I think that is a huge pillar of education in my mind. and heart?
I tend to say there are alders, there are elders, the trees that Tonto works with,
Yes.
forests, and when we teach our youth that those are our elders, there's a different reciprocity between planet and us. There's an exchange of seeing our elders.
The elders,
Yeah.
or the standing ones, right? While we're the walking. In this moment, we're the sitting ones. But it's interesting to take that perspective, right, and to zoom out and understand who are we as human beings on planet Earth? Why are we here? And then most of us, and Tonto, you mentioned that if you don't have food on your plate this week, there's no capacity to think outside of this week, and rightfully so, right? But most of us are in one way or other so trapped in with the ins and outs of daily life, or the ins and out of weekly life. And for most of us, then again, it connects back through money, which seems like, I think it's just one way of how we can invent a game. And maybe all of us can't even choose whether or not we want to be part of that game. We have to be part of that game. But what I've learned is the more I break the rules every now and then, play with the rules, I think is maybe even the better way to say it. And I zoom out and I gain this perspective that, others way before us had, thousands of years ago, indigenous people before us had, maybe the trees have, without me being able to make a lot of meaning out of what the trees tell me, but they do tell me something. And I think we all know this, right? There's like this common language on our planet that's the nonverbal language that we all connect to. I'm very curious, because the two of you are uniquely kind of positioned for that. I'm very curious how you both see if it's local wisdom in communities or in underprivileged communities where there's still maybe some original wisdom actually present, or if it's the indigenous people that you've met across your path so far, Manuela. How do those pieces of wisdom actually, where's their place in our global conversation in this time that we're in 2024 and beyond? Because life has changed. Like, things aren't the same as they were 20 years ago. Everyone wants to see this change, this evolution. There's like, let's actually open our hearts and find a way beyond the polarity of war, fear, and being slaves to a monetary system. So how do you both see this changing from original wisdom that's already been here on the planet?
Um, I can start. So I'm gonna uh, share this in a different in a different perspective. So,
Mm-hmm.
as individuals, we have individuality, right? We have uh, this need to be who we want to be, but as a whole, we cannot function without codepending on each other. I'm using this word codepending because I am telling you, there's no one. I'm sure none of you here have not needed anyone for something. So
Mm-hmm.
we are codependent beings. But going back to any community, I haven't really traveled as extensively as Manuela or maybe even most of you. But what I've learned is. Traditions that have been passed on from generations and generations are shared stories. Every community has a story, and it is that story that sometimes gives worth to not just an individual but to a community. So what comes out from all of this is, for instance, previously, like a lot of people from my community back home in Africa, we wanted to embrace this Western culture. They wanted to be like everybody else. But I'm seeing this shift into really embracing where we come from, where we are, and digging deeper into what made us the way we are now. So if you go back to those roots, I'm going to go and say roots now. You learn that that shared knowledge, those traditions are still circling back to how Mother Earth itself recycles and regenerates, because it's survival, it's instinct, and it also comes back to understanding that there is no one who can exist on their own without other people, other beings, or even Mother Nature itself. So I feel like we are existing in a time where this awareness, and that awareness brings about both individuality and that knowledge, of understanding that we cannot do without other people.
Oh,
Wow. And speaking of our standing one elders, the Aspens, I don't know if you all know, but they're all interconnected around the world. As you're saying this, that's what comes to me. Once one tree's falls, the leaves fall, then all of the other trees' leaves fall. So and then the redwoods, which are families of 5 coming together. So we are no one without community, and vice versa, belonging. So I love that. And wow. Yes, such an excellent question, and thank you for asking it. And I think that it is there's quite a bit of grief in that question for me, because, as you say, the storytelling that is being passed down, and especially from our elders and communities and from our Native and First Nations, we're seeing that more and more disappear. And I'm just curious, where in our conversation on the planet can we bring back this intelligence? I know that there's no way of going back, and I know that there's a way of going forward. And can we connect? To me, the abundance of the planet, it lives in the First Nations storytelling and in the way that the First Nations commune with the earth. And I'm not saying let's go back to like the fire and the cooking in the fire, but is there a way where we can bring what's happening right now, globally in globalization, in a conversation with like the intelligence of our elders and this community? How I go back to living in the Amazon, or staying in the Amazon for some time, and I remember the elder walking through, no map, no nothing, just actually he could just read the traces of the earth. And it was getting late, and we were here walking for like 8 hours, nowhere to be found. We could have been in the middle of the Amazon. I had no idea where we were, and this person was able to bring us back home. That level of attunement with our senses. And I work a lot with bringing people back into their gifts. And as humans, I feel we have all these incredible gifts of like seeing, feeling, hearing, and attuning to the earth and the planet and energy, right? And so to go back into that wealth of knowledge that we had because we had no distraction, and to commune back with the earth, I think, I live with that question, Julian, of how do we come back to this? Or I guess it's not back, but how do we move forward? Because in Colombia, like so many Native First Nations, indigenous groups are disappearing. It's like, and nobody's talking about it, right? And so the Kogi and the Aruacos and the Mamos, who hold such incredible intelligence, are still living, even though so many of them are the knowledge is disappearing. So how do we talk about education? How do we bring this back into our education somehow?
How do we honor a thread of that, right? That we can move forward, because as you said, we cannot go back, but we can move forward in a way that kind of honors several layers. Hope you were about to add something or ask a question.
I loved your question and both of your answers. And Julian and I have had the fortune of being in conversation with a number of people about what you just touched on, Manuela, talking about how do we bring people together to connect back to themselves, to connect back to our ancient wisdom, our inner guidance, our inner navigation, when our world is moving faster than ever, when our world is more distracted than ever. And Julian and I have been sort of untangling the knot of what AI is bringing to our culture, our worlds, what constant media and things vying for our attention from a very young human developmental age, little kids. As a parent, I think of it. People in their teens and in their 20s, 30s, humans that will really, hopefully, impact our future to come. I wanted to just veer over and kind of shine the spotlight on how both of you bring your attention back for yourself in this busy, hectic world. Or maybe it's not busy and hectic for either of you, but the general sense of busyness. And how do you come back to yourselves as individuals, listening to your compass, to your guidance? And also, perhaps, how do you help others Sounds like you already are, Manuela.
Tonto? Where should I go? I'll start. Okay. Another beautiful. This is just a space. What a conversation! I love these. I love these questions. That question is what brings me back to myself daily. Just recently, I kind of put the brake a little bit on traveling, and I think it comes with your 30s. You know, the 20s are all about exploration and out, and I think the 30s are about bringing all of that. Actually, there's no age. Maybe my 30s. Don't worry about the age. My 30s have been about bringing all of that, which I saw out in the world, and bringing it back into my own fire and seeing how I can cook it to best, again, be of service to others. And, you know, a constant daily routine, ritual practice supports me, whether it's just even lighting a candle and like just being with the fire for a little bit, or like lighting something incense. That small act of presence with yourself, it can be very small. I think people can get lost in the fact that you have to have 30 minutes of meditation and it has to be silence and quiet. For me, meditation is movement and dancing. And so every morning, if I can tune into a 3-minute song, that's how I get centered and grounded. And as I said, I think we have to start seeing everybody as different. What works for me might not work for you, right? And so it's really attuning and surrendering to what feels good and how you connect to that space, that liminal space, that space between earth and spirit. And it can be simple. It can be very simple.
Liminal space.
That's beautiful. I'm going back to you, Manuela. I want to travel more. I don't know what's going to happen, but I want to travel more. And for me, I think of technology and everything around me as a tool that aids me into doing whatever I want to do. So before everything else, I try to compartmentalize myself with what is happening around me. So if I think of my phone as a tool, I think of everything around every tool that is around as a tool. So I try to center myself by saying, you know, who am I? What is it that I want? What am I able to do? So I think a routine animal. I like I like scheduling everything in a way that helps me do the things that gets me back to me. So I think of everything else as a way to get back to where I want to be, which is definitely spend time with myself. So I use it. I use technology around me as a tool, and because I want to come back to myself, for instance, I literally can stay in bed for 2 hours doing nothing, not sleeping, not doing it, just thinking. So I it comes back to how long will I go back to that me moment, that moment where I get to reflect about everything that's happened around me, everything. I need to synthesize and remodulate everything so that I can sleep and go back. So I use it as a centerpiece, a centering piece for myself. How long before I finish using these two to come back to myself?
Oh, I heard a woman share something, and she was effectively mirroring what you just said, Tonto, and she called it vitamin me. And
Oh,
somehow, just bringing it up as vitamin me, she just had that visual in her head, and she's like, I have not had enough vitamin me. And she now shares it with her work colleagues. She's a school principal, and so she's acting as a beacon of influence for other people who do not take the time. They empty their bank accounts of vitamin me, and so now she's radiating it as a really beautiful, positive role model, and other women, other teachers, other children are seeing it's possible. So I love your vitamin me. Lying in bed and giving yourself vitamin me for 2 hours. Yes.
It actually allows you to connect not just yourself, but to things that you missed out on, missed opportunities, missed relationship. By opportunities, I'm not saying resource opportunities. I'm talking about an
Yeah.
opportunity to connect to something, an opportunity to
Mm.
nurture something, or to just take a moment to talk to a colleague who you noticed something off about. And those connections are essentially what we live for, because imagine if you had everything you want in the world. Imagine if you had all of those things, you had desires, but you don't have anyone to share them with. Essentially, what have you done?
And may I add to that? I think that right there is universal wealth, right there. Just being in the moment with the right like. I think people put so much emphasis on like. Don't get me wrong. I've traveled with $20 in my bank account. I've traveled with 100. It's like it fluctuates, but people put so much emphasis on money. But I think for me, it's that right there, which you just said, the power of one connection that can open so many more connections. And it's the power of mycelium, right? The like universal connection to each other. And I think when you say that, for me, what comes up is the listening, right? I think somehow coming back to that listening and deeply listening to somebody's story or what they're saying and how that like kind of relates to your own story or yourself, and then we just start connecting the world through our stories and through that knowledge. And again, I go back to elders, elders, youth, how we can all connect in that way. I think that's real wealth right there. One person, two people, and then the rest,
And I think that's what technology is taking away. That's the biggest challenge I think I see with technology. I see it as a great tool. It's great. It's shortening the time people get to do things. It's aiding other things, but it's really removing that human touch as well. That that how can I call it? That centerpiece that allows you to 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 m- to have a moment with somebody. Imagine you're already present with someone, but you're checking your messages. It disconnects you with everything around you. Imagine you are in nature in this beautiful forest, but all you can think about is, I'm already here, I can text this person. What our elders used to have was that time to really think about how to do things, how to be creative enough to solve problems. And because they invested that themselves to it, I think it 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 was not easy to let something go that was meaningful.
The I just had a visual in my head, and I do share this with younger people. I work with many younger people, and I have children. That time that we allow to solve a problem ourselves, or to sit with it, or to sit with a question, um, is so short now because we have all these tools.
Hmm.
We can immediately just pick it up, and even sometimes when I notice anxiety arises, or there's a feeling of being alone in a restaurant, you see sometimes our family looks over at a table. If we're at a restaurant, we're like, imagine seeing people sit alone without their phone. Whenever they're alone, they pick up the phone. And just drawing attention to that for young people starts to build an awareness that you can draw that space out longer, and that's a beautiful tool within.
Yeah. And I think, going back, I think, to what we've been discussing about authenticity and originality, like, uh, that is going to be a rare commodity going forward. And
Yeah.
it really comes back to what we are going to make of it, how we influence um, our space, and how that can be it's a seed that needs to be regrown. It's like, you have it in reserve, it's there. You can see it. It's just that out of reach. It's not wrong. AI technology, as I said, it's really helping, but it's that authenticity and originality that needs to come through now. And I think it's that nature of us that comes back to nature. Because if you don't have that feeling, if you continue relying too much on these tools, we are going to miss a key thing that will eventually might end us all.
I, al-
The humanity factor.
I always invite people to check when they're flying to like put their phone down and actually have the conversation with the person next to them. It's the funnest way to make friends. And all
Mm.
I say to that, which what you're saying, Tonto, is um, I think that perspective is everything, right? And with what I was saying, that we can't go back, we can only go forward. There's no world anymore without technology. So what a conversation are we going to have around, okay, this is actually a part of us, right? So here, we can't make it wrong, and it's here. How do we utilize it? Which is what you're saying. How do we utilize it for us and not against us? Right.
We're definitely at this very threshold moment in our human journey, right? And this is why we said at the beginning, and we're framing these episodes with usual is out the window. Actually, normal doesn't exist anymore. We're at this moment in our, evolution, maybe even as a whole species, if I may say that, where, we get to reflect, like, who are we really? Why are we here in the first place? What are we here to build and to leave behind, right? And so with AI at the stage where it's at, at the beginning of 2024, as we're recording all this, I think it's very, very much showing us, like, you be the human. But what does it mean to be human, right? So being authentic, being original, being creative, also being lazy. All of these are elements that are actually a part of the creative process. Being bored, being completely without a cell phone for a few days. I know, Manuela, you just went through this. I was forced through it about 2 months ago. My phone broke, and I was traveling and I couldn't get a new phone in time, and so I was without a phone for, I think, as little as 5 days. It was just 5 days. But first of all, the first few days of me realizing how often I have the impulse to pick up my phone, that was quite mind-boggling. I mean, it was horrible to realize. It's like, wow, I am addicted to touch my phone. And then the second step is this new freedom, this space of, like, wow, my partner just went to the bathroom. I'm here alone in a restaurant. I have nowhere to look. Right? And it's almost awkward, but I remember how it was growing up without a phone. Like, phones are not, they weren't omnipresent when I grew up. And so,
and you have to entertain yourself.
yeah. But not just entertain yourself. I mean, that's what the phones do for us, right? We know that they neurochemically, they keep us entertained in a quite addictive way, in an addictive loop. But actually, you have to be okay with yourself. You have to actually dive into the vitamin me and say, oh, yep, this is how it feels when it's just me. This is how life is when there's just me. Well, I'm okay with that, right? Because it's not necessarily that it is all the things we get from our cell phones, or even from social interactions, or from, whatever we do in life. Usually those are stimulations that get us something external. But the process of simply being with ourselves, I think that in itself is a breaking the rule, or worthy of mentioning. We kind of already dovetailed into it. I'm curious if there's more stories in the three of you. Hope, of course, you included, where you had one of those moments where you realized, Manuela, you just spent a week, I think, deliberately without technology. Maybe you care to share why you do that and what it does for you.
I think one of the things I noticed was, so when I was collecting field data for my PhD, and I was basically in the looking at projects, field projects, and being there, being present. I actually noticed how annoying it is when you are actually there doing something, and the person you want to get something from is now in this space utilizing their tools. You now start thinking within yourself, okay, wait, how do I get this person to do this? Am I being rude? Am I not acknowledging their space? But then again, I'm here, they're there, and the other person they are communicating with is somewhere else, or they're not giving me the attention I need. And I think just being in that space, what it does is it makes you self aware. And then you start thinking, oh, wait, let me mirror that back to myself. Is this what happens when somebody wants to get in touch with me who don't have the same sort of tools that I have? And then again, it's a circle. And then you think, wow, how do I now move from this space? It comes back to consciousness, being conscious of where you are, who you are with, and your intentions. So, and again, kindness, being kind to yourself and others around you. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's what I became cognizant of when that happened to me.
Yeah. And with consciousness, I think, comes So why I do this, at least I want to do it once a quarter. I do it 3 times a year, where I turn my phone off for at least a week. And then this just happened over the holidays, particularly because everybody's like, Happy New Year. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, I'm going to, bring it in with consciousness, as you say, but for me, consciousness is, and you say it, it's presence, right? Present. In order for me to be congruent with the work that I bring into the world, I first have to cultivate presence within myself so that I can support other people in cultivating that same presence. And that for me is to be so aware of we have what I believe we have more than 7, but we know 7 bodies, right? Physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. And so it's a cleanse of those bodies. It's a cleanse and a setting of an intention for the next season, right? So it's really honoring, going back to the seasons, really honoring where we are right now. It's snowing outside and all I want to go is in, right? So the last 5 days, it's going with the breath work, which Julian, you're very aware of, bringing in the breath, bringing in these practices, and really resetting my system so I can better show up in the planet. And I invite other people to do the same. So, yeah.
I wish that I had turned my phone off for the last week. I love that, the presence. And you also talked about listening, consciousness. I do notice that times I have been without my phone for long periods. I took a year traveling and didn't have a phone for huge portions of that. And I realized how I listened differently when I didn't have my phone. It's almost like a static awareness that it's always there, that I can always reach people in that way. And I started to speak to people in my head and in my heart in a different way, because I couldn't reach the phone, or I would take a picture in my head and in my heart, or visualize and really pay attention and be present to, oh my gosh, this is a beautiful landscape, or I can't believe this moment of my kids squishing each other's faces, and I'm not there with the camera, like taking photos. And so that presence and consciousness, now that I'm talking about it, it almost makes me emotional. I want to get back to that. I want to like pull it into my ether, and yeah, I'm already plotting in the back of my mind right now. I am listening to you, but I'm like, when can I take that week? Thank you.
Yeah,
I also
beautiful
believe,
thinking.
I also
Yeah.
believe that all the answers are right in front of us. I also
Yes.
really listening to another person or human, but it's spirit has a way, and I think that spirit, call it whatever you want, energy, quantum, whatever it is that you believe in, it has a way to show us everything that we need right in front of us. And I think sometimes because we're distracted, we are not listening and fine tuning to all the different, even in a conversation or like, my most recent examples, I was thinking about going to California and I get out of the plane. Had I been on the phone or something else, I wouldn't have listened. But there was 3 women right in front of me and it was like, California, California, California. And I'm like, okay, there it is. There's the, so it's like, it's all right there. And I think if we have that reciprocity with energy, I think we have all these answers that it's so fun to play with,
Yeah, that was a great example, and it's fun to play with, right? This is why we're talking about it, because these are all of the elements of life we have to play with. So yes, fundamentally, everything is already here right now, and that's why so many spiritual teachings go back into the now and the expansive moment of the here right now, right? I absolutely would agree with you, Manuela. There's nothing external needed. In fact, we can find and source everything on the inside, and yet at the same time, we're these human experiences, each one of us, that are fundamentally interconnected. Like Tonto, like you said earlier, we're codependent, we're interdependent, whatever word we want to choose, but we don't exist in a vacuum. But it's the same with our tools. So really, I mean, what we're I think kind of bumping against here in this conversation is it's paradoxically all true. Like, paradoxically, you can use your phone and play with your phone and create so much beauty and value for other people around you, as much as you can paradoxically get lost in that phone and like basically diminish your life spark, right? And then in the same way that I'm so grateful that we have this technology to have this conversation, to broadcast it out to everyone listening in, right? I'm also so grateful when I can put this phone away and I can just be. And I've been in a big city for the last 2 weeks in Mexico City here, and all I crave today, all day long, is like, I want to just spend time with a tree. I'm in the 14th floor somewhere, like floating over the concrete. It's too much. Like 2 weeks of that, and I'm completely fried. And so I think it's about getting to know myself, having that vitamin me, understanding when I need what part and which part of that equation, and when I can, sharing it outward again, right? I want to kind of move our conversation forward, because I think it's kind of along this paradox. You both have you're very connected through your lineages, through your roots, through your origin, through what you've learned from your parents, your families, but you also both have chosen to go on the academic journey, right? Manuela, you hold a master's from Harvard. Tonto, you're doing a PhD at the moment. Um, maybe both of you want to share on that. Is like, where do you see that value in both, maybe the traditional academic world, and then also the what we talked about earlier, the deep roots that actually make us so human.
Uh, I'll start. So, for me, the academic journey, I think, has not n- was not just meant for didn't just come along because my family believed in academics, or that um, education for us was the key to success, or into influencing something or becoming something. But for me, um, uh, I have this passion for the environment and for society and the interconnectedness and linkages that come with that. And I am I believe in forging a path towards influencing that space. And to do that, I felt it was necessary for me to build credibility towards becoming that person who I want to be. In this case, getting the understanding and the knowledge that comes with uh, being a practitioner or a systems leader or a systems thinker that can be able to actually illustrate theory into practical action, and being able to help the people I want to help. And for me to do that, I felt like I needed the tools and the skills, together with the resilience, because uh, going through this PhD journey now, I'm in the third of my fourth year. I feel like it's more a journey of a journey. It's not just the study itself. It's not just that credibility you're building or specialization into a certain field. It's basically your personal journey intertwined with that. It's building yourself, growing from strength to strength. It's also to do with building resilience and working through something and completing it. I feel that's that thing comes full cycle. And if you're doing something, for in my case, I'm doing something that I'm passionate about, and something that I have a genuine interest and a genuine not just genuine interest, but I want it to achieve something. I want it to be able to change something, not just in me, but in the communities I serve. So it's really more of coming from point A to B, but uh, making something else out of it. So when I
Mm.
did my master's, I felt like, oh yeah, I gained a very I specialized in tropical forestry. Yeah, I love systems thinking. I love science. I love all this. But uh, this PhD journey for me, first of all, it allowed me to move from things as normal. I could have done my PhD back home in Malawi, but that's why I'm in Wales now. I want to have a different perspective, because, to be honest, shaking yourself, removing yourself from the way you do things, I felt so biased. I felt like, okay, how come we are failing to shift this narrative from how come people don't we are a self-sustaining community, we are subsistence farmers, we grow our own food, we do this is not a bad state, this is something to be proud of. We are subsistence, we are self-reliant, but it's not referred to as that in other people's opinions. What am I missing? And that's why I uprooted myself and my son to come to Wales, to come to a different community and learn. And for me, the PhD journey is not for an academic accolade, but it's to prove to myself that I have what it takes to make the changes I need to make.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How far are
Yeah.
you? Almost finished your PhD journey?
No, I'm
Where
in
are
my
you?
third year. Hopefully, next year, by the end of next year, I'll be done. Hopefully.
Incredible.
Congratulations on your PhD. I am probably on that same track here later on. I don't know how soon, but I agree with you. And I have so many circles into this one question. I think I have many answers to this one question. I'll make it brief. But I think we've spoken about it. Tonto said it, how do I go about this? Education as a whole as a system. We're talking about coloring outside of the lines.
Mm.
It's been an ancient system placed upon us to create us in some way, right? We all have gone through education. Well, not all of us, but the ones that have privilege to go through education have gone through education from very early on in our years. And I think part of what I want to understand is how does kindergarten, or how does like that beginning of connection into the outside world can create and condition a human being, and especially in our youth, right? Like, why are we learning math? Why are we learning to write? Why are we not learning to utilize our energy in the way that we are, or breathing techniques, or how can we support anxiety? So education has been for so long something that in some way I believe has been placed on us. And what is the difference of something that's being placed on us versus something that we're choosing? And I chose to do a master's at this Harvard institution because I wanted to understand what creates how do leaders in our world get taught to become leaders. And so more than going to do a master's going to more to do a master's, I think it was an incredible pause for myself to take the pause and understand what you said, Tonto. I think you said it perfectly. It's like get away from something you knew and get yourself into a completely different place to understand a different part of yourself. Not only understand a different part of myself, but then understand a different level of humanity, And I think that it gives a really important pause and a restructuring, a reframing, a studying. But I also really invite people to question the system, right? So I went to the school, and different belief systems are placed on us. How can we actually kind of question? I think so many of us just go through like the hamster's wheel, and this is what we're being taught, and so this must be right, right? So talking about coloring outside the lines, how do we question what we're taught? Because I believe that there's not really a right answer, right? And so I think that philosophically speaking, we have so many people before us creating these philosophies, this thought process. And I think what's so fun about education is coming and actually like, oh, okay, this is what I'm being taught. Let's put this into practice. Does this actually work? And so a lot of why I went to school was also to be able to create spaces of education, as we've said before, for youth to actually support them in the journey of being in this human suit. And I think one of the biggest things I learned in my master's is the incredible work that we still need to do in our education system. Like, I think is one of the most broken systems in the planet. And then the fact that, first of all, millions of people don't have access to it. And what they have access to is completely, it's a box, right? You're talking about coloring outside the lines. How can we actually have this conversation? Because I think all of the problems that root here in humanity are actually at the root of education. So if we can actually start asking the right questions and come together to maybe create a new way of educating, which I think is actually slowly happening, I think we have a possibility of actually having different educations.
Oh, you're speaking to my heart. You're speaking my language. Julian knows I have been on a quest for many, many years, rooting out rule breakers, change makers, trailblazers around the world who are forging different paths in education. Humans of all ages. I just hopped off a call right before speaking to you, beautiful humans, with a 17-year-old who um, she's leading the charge of creating a system where all her high school friends go to school for 2 hours a day. And the rest of the day they spend on impact driven missions around the world. And they're completing their high school. They're getting into all the top universities if they choose. Um, it's really remarkable and inspiring to see what is possible. And thanks to technology, I or others can connect over these waves and inspire each other and send out these ripples of impact. I agree with you, Manuela and Tonto. There is so much when we forge on a mission. You both are on a mission, on a quest, and you sync up with other people who are also on a quest. The combined impact of our individual quests are pretty profound. I salute both of you in your work.
Likewise, I just got chills at what you shared. Like my crown was like the fact that 17. See, I'm telling you, whoever's coming
Mhm.
into this now, their capacity to see beyond. We're in, as Julian says, we're in a different time, and there's only like possibility here as well. So.
But I do love your point of questioning.
Mm.
And it does come back to our belonging to ourselves and listening to our voice and listening to who we are, making that pause, that space for vitamin me for young people to not just wholeheartedly take on what doesn't feel right, what feels like an itchy sweater or, something that's just constricting and tight and not relevant. So they therefore label education or learning as something they don't want to do. But if they are exposed to inspiring sparks of people on a quest or new settings or new opportunities, they can see that lifelong learning is their birthright. It is within them already. And I am seeing more and more people be brave and step out, whether it's young people going against their families, their schools, saying, enough, I need to do this my way, and I will show you that it's possible. To older people who've been in the system for a long time. And in some ways, that's just as brave. They say, it's just not working. I'm willing to go against a tidal wave of people who think I'm crazy. And I just come in with my hopeful love energy saying, you can do it. Keep on. Totally.
I also
Imagine
feel like
that.
one of the things that education uh, really needs to move towards is the concept of diversity, because
Mm,
we are different people, very different people, and what having this standardized way of doing something is can kill a lot of creativity, but it can also kill individual spirits. Um,
yes.
I, I was very fortunate to visit this one community. They don't have schools, normal schools. What they do is they have different trades. By trade, I mean carpentry or fisheries, all
Mm,
sorts of things in that community. What they do is they just make sure that every child in that community has had a chance to experience all these different things and to understand different things, uh, in the sense that their education system is basically structured towards learning different things until you find that thing, that which you
mm,
feel you feel like is your calling. Of
aligned.
course,
Yeah.
yes. Of course, there can be a lot of debate towards what the exposure, the right. But I feel like individually, as going back to vitamin me, everybody has that. If you take the time to reflect, what we need essentially are the right mentors, people who actually encourage us to go back and reflect towards our own worth, the young people's worth, what it is that they want to grow, the seed they want to grow within themselves in order to become change agents or just somebody else or something they really want to become. And it's that it's that seed that needs to be planted, I think, ideally, understanding that we are diverse people, we have diverse personalities, and most of all, we are individuals who can grow and learn different things that are very good for this planet and society.
Mentorship.
Yeah.
Give us more.
It's not a new idea. It's not a
Give
new
us
idea,
more.
but we need
Manuela, I happen to know that mentorship has been part of your life from the start. Can you tell us? Can you tell us about it?
All my different, this is where this is where I think of money, like wealth. Like, this is for me, generational wealth is the incredible wealth and knowledge that is a library from anywhere from 50 to 90 years old. I have been incredibly privileged to have an incredibly vast, diverse circle of mentors who are the reason I am where I am today. Actually, I often start circles by acknowledging each of them, past or not past. Starting with my parents, but I think wow, talk about education. I think the real education is coming from people who have been through it, who carry that in their library of emotion. I think I have mentorship ranging from mythology to energy to environmental to all of it. And I think just, again, we go back to listening and storytelling. And if we actually just listen to our elders and our olders, I think that's a lot of, you talk about, we don't want to finger point at any countries or continents, but if I were to point to the Western continent, we have skipped, we are creating a gap between elders, olders, and there's such a beautiful synergy and exchange that happens between an elder and a youth. And you know what? One thing that most of the elders and olders that I am a part of, or their lives, all they want to be is listened to. And again, we go back to listening, right? And they have so much vast knowledge. And so my invitation to anyone listening is to just listen to one older person in their life and what they've been through. I whether it's heartbreak, or whether it's the war, or whether it's something, they're willing and wanting to share, and their skill sets. And again, I just, oh my gosh, I could talk about this for eons, but I'll stop. I think that is one thing we need to bridge and build a bridge, is elders and youth, because I think that's where
intergenerational transfer. Julian and I met actually through a mutual mentor, heart mentor, right, Julian?
That's right. I just had a yawn, which usually means I need more oxygen. My whole brain was just all of these figures in my life, my grandparents, Phil, who you just talked about. It's it's very real, right? And this is why these conversations can be so fruitful. Is we all deep down we know, right? We don't need to watch another thing on social media to understand that it would be so wise and so deep to listen to an older person in our life. But you sharing this right now, Manuela, it landed for me personally. My whole body was like, I need more oxygen. So I really love that, and I think there's such a beauty in places and cultures and countries and whatever we want to call it, and groups of people where that still is the case, where that still is being honored. You can feel it, right? There's there's maybe a limitation to that too, because if you're all living together with your grandparents and your parents and the kids and the kids of the kids, then that's a lot, right? It's a little tribe, but it's also at the same time, it's where those stories get passed on. It's where these pieces, these gold nuggets of wisdom get passed on. And yeah, I'd say, having grown up in an industrialized country, that was just never part of the mission. No one really cared about it. I mean, I love my grandparents. I love listening to them. They know that too. So we have those moments now. But growing up, the point was always to individualize, to become an individual unit from the family. Can you all relate to that in one way or other?
I'm going to tell you something, Julian.
Yeah.
I grew up in that state where there was generations in one house. At one point, there were 16 people in the house.
Oh.
Literally,
Wow.
that's why I kept talking about my grandfather, Julian. And I think were actually asking why is she saying her grandfather was a farmer who, and I keep saying I grew up in a smallholder farming family. Yes, I grew up in such an extended family where with grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, my cousins, it was that huge of a family, and I can tell you it was never boring.
Yeah.
and and the
It was
right
rich.
yes, and I tell you that starting from those connections, in fact, that's how our society is made of. You know, you call your cousins your brothers and sisters.
Right.
This is the
Mm.
society I grew up in. It's you. In fact, we don't call your mother's sister just your aunt. In our local language, she's called like your younger mom or your elderly mom. Yeah, that's how
Yeah.
you do it. And oh, your father's brother is not just your father, your uncle. You call them oh my younger father or something like that. But in my language, it makes sense. I'm just trying to literally translate it. But that there's a worth of different when you grow up in a society like that, you already have the I feel like I was privileged to have had the experience of relating with different personalities, different individuals, and sort of lots of ways to sort out through conflict, through so many other things. And that diversity, I think, enabled me to grow into who I am right now. And yeah, Julian, I did grow up in such a society, and it was
Your
amazing.
face just lit up
Yeah, it just like
talking
shows.
about your family. It's like you propelled us
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And it's like an inner human knowing. We know what it
Yeah.
I'd like to know what it would feel like to be in that intergenerational living situation. I didn't grow up with that. And
Imagine
my two
during dinner,
children,
we would
they
all
didn't.
be during dinner, we would all be together, and that's when the
Oh,
storytelling became. And there was no television. It was literally. It was literally the time where people were getting punished or rewarded.
right.
So there was it
Like
was
a court.
yeah, it was exciting. Eh,
Oh,
People,
wow.
yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
You're beaming it.
Oh.
You're beaming it. I
Usually,
wonder. Yeah, go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Hope, please.
No, I have this one question that Julian knows I'm probably going to ask because we're talking about being with elders and intergenerational transfer, and I often like to follow the practice of talking to myself when I'm old. And I wonder if either of you do that, and if either of you ever speak to your elder self for wisdom, for guidance, for love.
My parents used to tell me this story that when I was 7 or 6, when I first started talking, that I would tell them that I was going to feel my age when I had gray hair. And I've carried that with me because I believe that I was born an elder. And I really feel like this very ancient trunk of a tree inside of me. That's why I'm happy. I'm happiest with elders around me because I feel like I speak them. I can hear them so deeply in my being. And so I'm constantly talking to that part of myself. I'm actually really excited. I think society has a bit of a hard time aging, but I'm actually really excited to get to that place where I can just be with the youth and like hug them and send out love. And I kind of could feel that from all of us a little bit, but that's
Yes.
what I feel. Yeah.
Yeah,
What about
Manuela, that wiseness is coming out. I can feel it from you.
yes.
You
Yeah.
too, Toto, though. I feel it too. I feel like we've been, older ladies sitting by the fire, just, I feel that.
Telling
It's
the
like,
stories,
Cackling.
or talking about your travels, telling them your experiences.
Your
Yeah.
eyes sparkling and the beautiful wrinkles
Yes,
and
yes.
the hands
Yeah,
moving around.
And going back to what Manuela was saying, yes, people are having quite a hard time growing old.
Yeah.
I feel like really going back to the tools, the internet, social media, it's bringing out. I'm not saying it's also not wrong to embrace, to find ways to become more physically fit or exercising. It's great. But I think it's good to set realistic standards so that people don't feel left out. Because there are some parts of what is being seen on social media that is not
Mm.
universal to everybody. Some people are looking the way they're looking because they have the resources to do that. But some people age gracefully well that
Mm.
and they become more beautiful and they showcase an aura of understanding when we see them grow. So I feel like we are not doing the younger generation any mercy if we do not show them that it's great to grow and it's okay to 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 become wiser and older.
Mm.
That's the acceptance of. I always see that in women that are aging. I admire women that are aging beautifully, and I feel that that's the acceptance of their wisdom, their knowledge, their being. And I think that it goes back to, if we accepted our elders, olders, if we included them as in your communities, like if we included them back into family and not put them in, in a old
They
folks
literally,
home.
to be honest, I might be wrong, but I haven't heard of any elderly home in Malawi. They are part of the community in every
Neither,
society.
yeah.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
They're the fire of the community.
And as they grow older, if even as they grow older, they're embraced within their families. So that's the thing. If somebody is better off than the other, they're the ones that say, "Oh, can we need to bring the parents back home with us? We need to." That's what happens. But we are also slowly losing that aspect because I guess everybody wants to have this nuclear family where it's just the mother, the father, and their kids. And to be honest, this is since I came to Wales, it's the first ever time it was just me and my son, and I felt weird at at the beginning because there was always somebody to talk to, somebody to reason with, and when you're parenting your child, do you know there's this great sense uh, of support when
Yeah.
you're not the only person parenting your child because there's this
Yeah.
whole community around you that is teaching your child when you're not there, and it kind of safeguards them as well. It
Yeah.
allows them not to just learn from you, but it allows them to learn from other people and to understand that
Diversity.
being different
Yes.
is not wrong. being being a certain way is not wrong. You can exist as that, and I think that's what I love most about my culture.
I do have some hope. There
Yes.
is there are more communities that are now clustering together as intergenerational um, collections or ecosystems. I just moved in the last few years to a small town in Quebec, Canada, and I would never have moved here before. I would have said it was a retirement community. Why do I want to move there in my 40s? And this community has such an intergenerational mixture. I've never experienced anything in North America like this. When we have parties with 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 40-year-olds, and they all are in conversation. They collect stories, they share. It's a beautiful thing. And I feel like it's starting to bubble up. People need it. They want it.
Mm.
And so they're not just going to have larger families and live all together, but they're going to find different ways to access that.
You have kids, Hope. Well, Tonto, you too. It takes a village to raise the children,
Kids, yeah.
So
Yes.
I have hope too.
Yes. Yes.
So much hope in this conversation. It's been a blast to speak with the three of you, all four of us. This is why we made this series, is because we know times are changing. Usual is out the window. The rules need to be at the very minimum played with, right? Because deep down, this was so apparent in this conversation, no matter where we come from on the planet, we all are so alike. We're also very different, we're unique. And deep down, we all deeply know there's like this infinity spark into all of creation that we can't really lose, no matter where we are in the world, right? And so This conversation was a beautiful reminder of that to me. Thank you so much for being here with us, for inspiring everyone tuned in. I want to give everyone the chance to check out, though, with maybe Hope. It's time for my favorite question of this entire series. If having difficult conversations was an Olympic sport, what would be your signature move? Manuela, go.
Oh, the first thing that came up was dancing.
Nice.
I've never heard that. I love it.
Tonto, what about you?
Running.
You'd run away?
No,
You'd
running
run away?
a marathon. No.
Running a marathon. Wait. If having difficult conversations was the Olympic sport,
Yes.
what would be your signature move? You would still be running?
No. Yes. Oh, let me say this. You're right. I wouldn't stick with running, but I think I would stick with like tennis, playing tennis, bouncing it back and forth. Bouncing that ball back and forth. Yeah.
I like the sports answers. Tennis, running, dancing.
I'm gonna be by the fire with you guys. I feel like I'm sitting by a fire, metaphorical fire. I would like the fire to be there. I would like the standing ones behind us, maybe in a circle. Those standing ones bringing some wisdom inherent. Such a pleasure, such an honor sharing this fireside chat, this breaking the rules conversation.
Yeah.
I'm just very, very honored to spend this time with all of you.
Thank
It's
you so
great
much
to be here.